Hey guys, welcome to Speak Freely here. We celebrate the freedom of speech, and today we're turning to Dr. Peterson, and he's going to be discussing the George Floyd situation. So unless you've been living under a rock, you don't know who George Floyd is. George Floyd is the person who was killed or murdered by the police officers by kneeling on his neck, and that sparked the summer riots. I mean, it started off as mass global protests, but it turned into the summer riots that cost millions of damages, loss of life, loss of jobs, and people are still picking up the burnt pieces today. We're gonna see what these two gentlemen have to say about it. We're gonna get right into it, but before you do, if you like these type of videos, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell to get notification when I do upload. All of that really does help with the algorithm, guys. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, you can donate. My PayPal and Cash App link is in the description box below and also in the comment section. Of course, it helps, but you don't have to. You can just like, comment, and subscribe. Another great way to support the channel is to visit my brand new merch shop, and all the ways to support me, my socials on all the alternative platforms I'm on is always in the links down below. Other than that, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. All right, here we go.
After George Floyd was killed by Derek Chauvin, the police officer in Minneapolis, and there were protests that broke out in cities around the world, and especially cities around the United States. And some of those protests turned violent. And there was riotous behavior and assaults on police officers, and there was arson and looting, and there was general disorder. And it's a big political football, and people are on all sides of it, and they're defenders of it, and so forth and so on. But it occurred to me that I did not even know that the incident that happened with a white police officer and the black gentleman who died, who was killed, was a racial incident. I say I did not know that it was a racial incident. All I knew was that the police officer was white and that the man who was killed was black. It didn't follow from that it was a racial incident. We were making it into a racial incident. We being all of us here in the United States, we were making it into a reenactment of old American dramas of lynching and the murder of black people by rogue police and so forth and so on. We took that thing and we said, yes, see, here we have proof of the knee on the neck of Black America. That's what Al Sharpton, the activist, said at the funeral of George Floyd. He said, America has its knee on our neck. And I thought, this great country of 330 million people with 40 million black people, and here we are 150 years after slavery and a half century since Martin Luther King was killed. Really? That's going to be the narrative for our country's politics for the next decade, for the next 15 years? This is what we're going to teach to our children. This is how we're going to arrange our media coverage of these events. That's a disaster for this country.
Okay, so how can you say that when you also have spoken so eloquently on topics such as the differential incarceration rate? This is not an assault on your statement, by the way. I'm very curious because obviously, you've spoken profoundly about the danger of that differential incarceration rate. And you can see that it's not that easy to conceptually disentangle, especially if you're politically motivated. But even if you're not, an event like that from that broader narrative that something's not right structurally, and perhaps this is a reflection of it. But, well, so I don't know how to reconcile those two viewpoints. I don't know how you reconcile them.
With difficulty, I suppose I could say, because they do point in slightly different, maybe even more than slightly different directions, but I'm trying to keep my perspective.
Right.
I do think that the advent of what they call mass incarceration, 2.25 million people under lock and key on a given day, half of them, or 45% of them, being black people when we're 12% of the population, as a way of doing business going forward without any sense of urgency of reform, without any revisiting of our drug laws or our sentencing or whatever, without any attention to what is supposed to happen when someone is in prison, rehabilitation and whatnot, without any exploration of alternatives to incarceration as ways of responding to criminal offending, is bad for our country. I do believe that. And I believe the racial aspect of that echoes with our history in ways that are dangerous and that we dare not neglect. I'm the same guy. On the other hand, I think if you racialize the discussion of crime and punishment, there was the woman who was murdered at Columbia University a few years ago, and she was killed by these kids who were just trying to rob her, and they ended up stabbing her to death. She was white. She was, you know, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name offhand. But, you know, she was a lovely young woman, and innocent is how she's going to appear in the photograph. And she certainly did nothing to deserve what befell her. And she was white. The
Right.
kids who
So that's
killed
the other side of it. Yeah. Right.
Tessa something is her last name. I can't recall. The kids who killed her were Black kids from around Harlem. They were in the park.
Yeah.
They were looking
I
for a quick
remember.
score. They had a knife. The woman is lying. She bleeds out. Now they've convicted. One of them has been convicted. And I'm looking at the photo in the newspaper, and here's this Black kid. He looks like a Black kid who's 16, 18 years old. He's a kid. And he's from this impoverished neighborhood, and he's Black. And the woman is white. I don't want that incident processed in terms of Black kid murders white woman in the park.
Yeah. Okay.
I understand what he's saying, and I'm glad Dr. Jody Peterson answered that question, because it makes me, you know, reminds us that he is a critical thinker, and he's not just pandering to whatever guest he has on, and he's not going to just agree with any guest because they happen to lean to his own ideology. I think two things can be right at once. I feel like, again, in today's society, especially in the West, operates in black and white, and I don't think life is black and white, it's nuance. So I do think two things can be right at one time. The incarceration system can be unfairly mass incarceration people of color for whatever reason. It could be because of the root causes of why they're there, you know, like single mother households and poverty and the horrible public education system and the lack of opportunities. It could be a lot of reasons. It might not just be because they are Black. And I heard another person talk about the reasons could be because, like, of the, I guess, the stereotype or the statistic when it comes to kids raised a certain way, they might develop this way. So, like, if a judge has a kid that's from the suburbs, a kid that's from, like, the ghetto, and they might look at the white kid and go, okay, statistically speaking, this white kid probably has a better chance in going off to college or getting a job and having a family. This Black kid, statistically speaking, was raised by a single mother. He lives in an impoverished area that is gang-ridden. Statistically speaking, he has more chances of repeating crime. So I'm going to give this kid a harsher crime sentence than I give the white kid. That doesn't mean it's fair, and that is innate bias within that judge, and he should not be operating from that place. But that's why somebody else explained it that way. But anyway, that is, I don't want to go on a tangent or rant, but this is to say that two things can be right at the same time. That can be right, but also every situation that involves two different races doesn't mean that it's racial. So the cop who killed George Floyd, it doesn't necessarily mean that cop was racist or the incident was racial. It just couldn't mean that that was an untrained, ill-trained cop that murdered another person or killed another person. As the same when it goes to the Black kids who killed this white woman in the park or whatever, it doesn't mean that they killed her because she was white. It doesn't mean that incident was racial. It's just a terrible incident that happened because of who these people are, or because of their upbringing or their household or their community or lack of training or whatever, right? It doesn't mean everything is racial. And if you make everything racial, then you're never going to get to the root problems or the root issues of things, right? If you just say the mass incarceration is just a racial issue and it's just race and that's it, you're never going to get to the root causes of why so many people are putting themselves in situations where they are committing crime, right? You're never going to be able to change that, the root issue of things, right? And so, like, I understand what he's saying, but anyway, let's continue.
So maybe it's an issue. Maybe it's an issue of conflation, careless conflation of levels of analysis, hey? Because you're talking about a high resolution analysis of structural problems in the penal system, and to put that George Floyd event, to cram that into the same narrative, is sort of bespeaks of undifferentiated thought. And then you point out that the danger of that is, well, if you're going to racialize the white cop against the black victim of the homicide, well, then why can't the same thing be done exactly the same way when the reverse happens? And maybe we shouldn't do any, or we should do as little of that as we possibly can. That doesn't mean we shouldn't take a look at these bigger structural issues, but we shouldn't cram it all together in one thing, because it's not.
That's very well put, Jordan. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. You said it better than I did.
Well, I listened to you, so that was a big help.
By the way, if we do cram it all into one thing, God help us, because there are people, and they're not going to speak out. There are people who will see it process it just as I hope they would not do. Black thug murders innocent white girl, and harbor a resentment and nurse that resentment. And that's a tinder box. That's a powder keg waiting to be lit. And we can dismiss it if we want to, but those people are not entirely wrong in their sentiment. They need to be disabused of that instinct, that instinct to conflate those levels of analysis.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the problem I have with ideology, is that's ideology is so low resolution. It does that conflation. It doesn't notice.
Stopping it there, I totally agree. Like the whole making everything about race, like the progressive left tries to sort of like isolate it and make it only a black or a people of color thing. That's why it's like only white people can be racist, right? And so the left will never go, these black thugs killed this white woman, that is a racial thing. They will never do that because they're trying to isolate it, right? But if it's a white cop with a black person, they will make it a racial thing because they're trying to isolate it and make it only like the oppression of color people or people of color. But if you're making everything a racial thing, you can't stop everybody from then now seeing everything through race. And it's like we can't ever move forward because now you're bringing this, like we're regressing back to a time where everybody did just see each other's race and everybody judged each other off of their race and stuff like that. So you can't isolate it. If you're going to make that the perspective in the sort of the keyhole to see everything through, then everyone's going to do that, not just isolated for the privilege of only people of color being able to do those things, or just for the benefit of people of color, right? Anyway, let's continue. And
when you get educated, you start differentiating. It's like, and that's kind of what you said happened to you when you became more conservative. Once you got more educated, it's like, this is, when I take this apart and see all the moving pieces, this is way more complex than my low resolution representation guided me to believe to begin with. And I've experienced that many times in my life when I tried to take problems apart so they could be solved instead of just discussed, let's say. You have to make a high resolution model before you can get anywhere. That's true in clinical practice, and I think it's true in public policy. And partly what we're doing when we're educating people, if we're doing it right, is saying, hey, you've got a map of the world, but it's not very detailed. And when you really look at it, well, here's the complexity. And that's what we're actually contending with.
I think he's probably going to say what I'm about to say. But I think the reason why people, they rather lean towards those sort of the simplistic causes of things like white supremacy or systematic racism, because sort of this sort of obscure thing that I really can't tackle, but I can kind of talk about it and sort of win brownie points for being on the right side of history. But when you really break it down to the root causes, it's a lot more complex and it's a lot more difficult to fix, and it takes longer to fix those issues. But people don't want complexity and they don't want hard, they want simple and they want easy, especially if you're just virtue signaling on the internet or you're just a screaming banshee at an activist protest. I don't want to talk about the complexities, that is hard, I can fix that, but if I just scream about this obscure patriarchy and racism, then it's something out there that I can't really touch or do, but at least I look like I'm doing something. It's almost like fake busy work, like it looks like I'm fixing an issue but I'm really not. But anyway, let's continue.
Ending with, people don't like that because, well, it's complex, right? And you have the simple solution at hand to begin with, but the problem is it isn't the right tool for the job. You got to make it high resolution, and that takes a lot of work.
Okay, so that was it. So he basically just said what I was going to say. It takes a lot of work and people don't want to do the hard stuff. They don't want to do the actual work to it. Anyway, guys, tell me what you think about what they said about the whole George Floyd situation. What do you think about the situation? I personally think that he was wrongfully killed. I don't think he should be held up as a martyr, and I'm sick of the not so best examples of the black community always being held up as martyrs. I think he was a disturbed person who was wrongfully killed. I think there was absolutely no good at all that came from these protests or riots. There was no good policies that was put into place. I think the conversations were tilted in bias and no real in-depth conversation about how we really got here actually really happened, besides again this obscure idea of like police are just hunting black people or systematic racism. We never actually really talked about how did he even get there, and how did this cop get there? Why do we have a lack of training in the police academy? Why? Because from what I believe that I heard that the kneeling on the knee was actually a technique that they were taught, but for some reason the way he was angled, he died from it or whatever. Anyway, I'm not trying to justify why he died or what the police did. I think it was all wrong, but I don't think anything good came out of it. I think everyone lost at the end of the day. Anyway, tell me guys what you think about it in the comment section below. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification so you can get notified when I do upload. All of that really does help with the algorithm, guys. And if you'd like to donate, my PayPal and Cash App link is in the description box below and also in the comment section. Of course it helps, but you don't have to. You can just like, comment, and subscribe. I also have a second travel vlog channel. I travel as a lifestyle or I live abroad. If you'd like to know where I am in the world, you can go to the description box below and also in the comment section. Hit the link, go subscribe to my travel vlog channel and or follow me on my travel Instagram. My stories is usually was most up to date, and I also have my first commentary channel, a little bit more light-hearted subjects, music, but still some in-depth commentary. Go subscribe to that channel if you like. Other than that, you guys have an amazing day. Bye.